wanted to put together one final video kind of summing up what I've learned about doing these candy apple wraps and give you some pointers in case you want to try to do these yourself that might help you out. I'll also be showing some photographs of different wraps I tried, testing out different ways of doing decorative wraps with this method, and I'll tell you about some of those wraps as well. I've already done a couple of videos on this method, and I will put links to those in the top right hand corner. This is just going to kind of summarize what all I've learned. First of all, the candy apple wraps are when you put metallic thread as your base wrap, and then you wrap over the top of that with a non-color protected thread, just regular thread, no color protectants used on the thread after you put it on, and the thread doesn't come with color protectant already on the thread itself. And the idea is that the regular thread will go translucent when you put the epoxy on it, and what will show through will be the metallic thread underneath. So you can lighten or darken your threads by choosing lighter or darker metallic threads underneath. The metallic thread on the bottom that makes the thread appear closest to what it does on the spool would be silver. Yellow gold's a little darker, copper's even darker, and I haven't tried using colored metallic threads, but it would kind of follow the same logic. The lighter the color, the lighter the wrap will appear, and it will appear more like what's on the spool. The darker the color underneath, the darker the thread will look. I'll real quickly go over some of these decorative wraps I've done. As you can see on this first one that I did a video on, and again I'll have links to these in the top right hand corner. If you'll click the info button, it'll pull up these links. The first decorative wrap I did on that video, I made some faux inlays. They're not actual inlays, but they kind of look like inlays just by skipping the thread over a little bit. You can see here another example where I did that in a slightly different way on just a test piece just to see what it would look like. And these are all done the same way. The thread just crosses over. You make it as wide or as narrow as you want to. And these, when they're epoxied, look a whole lot like inlays would. This next wrap, I wrapped some black in front of the metallic, and then I skipped a space by just sliding my thread over again and continued the black for a little bit, and then I wrapped my color behind that just to give a little different look. And on this wrap, I did a decorative wrap that I've shown a whole lot on my channel in different ways of doing them. I call them a helix wrap. You're wrapping the metallic thread around the primary thread and making kind of a spiral shape with it. I'll put a link to one of these helix wraps where I show how to do those in the top right hand corner of this video as well. And I thought that looked pretty good on the guide itself, on the foot of the guide. I normally would not do that, but since the metallic thread underneath is wrapped as a single piece across the whole guide, and this is an inshore rod, it's actually a freshwater rod, and it will hold up fine using metallic, especially the metallic I use. I don't believe I mentioned this. The metallics I use are actually for machine embroidery thread, and they're pretty rugged. They're a little tougher than a lot of the metallics you'll find, and I just picked this up at Walmart, and all the thread I use that you see on my channel just about was bought from Walmart. I use machine embroidery thread for most of my rod building needs. Now I'm going to give you some tips on doing these wraps. These are pretty straightforward. They're not difficult in my opinion to do, but they give you a really neat look due to the transparency of the thread itself and still not being able to see the guide foot or anything like that underneath, because the metallic thread is your base layer, and that's what shows through, and it gives a little glitter effect to the thread, and it just gives a pretty unique look that I really like. So my tips would be just to make sure that you pack in your metallic thread really well. Use a fair amount of tension on your metallic thread. My second tip would be to wrap your color thread over the top that you want to go translucent. Wrap it fairly loosely. That way you can move the thread around easier in order to pack it in. It will also allow a little more of that metallic look to show through. But the biggest tip of all, and I did not do that on any of the ones you're looking at, but I'll show you what happens when you don't. After you put down your base metallic thread, I would go ahead and put a layer of epoxy on that before you come back with your primary color that you're going to wrap over the top of it. There's one major reason I would strongly encourage you to do that, and that is, as you can see here, what looks like a dirty spot on the thread, because you can still see the thread, is actually not a dirty spot. What those are areas where when I was manipulating my thread around, it opened up a gap in the metallic thread underneath it. Even though it was packed tight and it was wrapped with a fair amount of tension, the metallic underneath moved, and I didn't know it until I put epoxy on it. So what happens then is you get a magnification effect of the rod blank that's showing through in that small gap on the metallic thread. It's showing through like a magnifying glass, and it's amplifying that black coming through because your colored thread is now translucent. It's just showing right through just as the metallic thread would. So I would highly encourage you to put something down to hold that base layer of metallic in place, and that is an extra step, but for the look you get, I think it's worth the effort. But if you put down some epoxy on top of that metallic thread before you come back with your primary color and wrap over the top of it, everything's going to work better. You're going to be able to pack your primary color threads a lot easier because they'll slide around better because they're not sliding on top of the metallic thread, and you won't get these little gaps that can open up on the metallic thread. A good thin layer of epoxy on that metallic thread, and then come back with your primary color. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing major to do in these wraps. There's that one extra step of epoxy in that metallic thread. Other than that, they're pretty uncomplicated. I hope you've enjoyed watching some of these videos about a process that I was new to personally. I've heard about it for a long time, and I've never gotten around to trying it out. I saw some stuff online that I really liked the looks of and decided to give it a shot. I hope you've enjoyed watching the process that I've gone through and kind of played around with this some. And I will be using this on a build at some point. I like the way it looks too much not to use it, so I'm going to do that in the future. But I wanted to put these videos out to show you something that you might keep in mind and put it in your bag of tricks of things you might try yourself. But that's all I've got for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and y'all take care, and I'll talk to you later.